It's been 7 years, Richard Boyle says, have left him broken. The whistleblower emerged from court to jubilation. South Australia's District Court recorded no conviction or jail time.
Hello, I'm Linton Besser. Welcome to Media Watch. And tonight, a federal whistleblower facing the prospect of years in prison is instead granted compassion by a South Australian judge and allowed to walk free.
I just want to say thank you to all the supporters. That's all for today. Thank you very much.
Richard Boyle's life story took its dramatic turn in 2018 when this groundbreaking investigation exposed the aggressive tactics used by the Australian Taxation Office to recover debts, seizing funds, destroying businesses and pushing some taxpayers to the brink.
We were essentially ordered and directed to start doing standard garnishes on every case, and I was absolutely shocked.
There's an agenda that's going on in there, and the Australian public know nothing about it. We knew nothing about it. We were naive. How can you describe someone who's trying to destroy your livelihood and destroy your way of life? I'd call that evil.
Days before the program aired, Richard Boyle's home was raided by the Australian Federal Police. 9 months later, he was charged with 66 offences and faced the prospect of up to a decade in prison. Boyle's motivation, his concern for taxpayers, mattered not to senior ranks of the tax office, nor to Commonwealth prosecutors, nor to former Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus, the prosecution continuing apace. Also unhelpful, the nation's public sector whistleblower protection law, given royal assent in 2013, which the courts decided did not allow for the gathering of evidence to support allegations of wrongdoing, and which forced Boyle to take a deal and plead guilty to 4 charges. Last year, he gave a speech in which he reflected on the cost of his courage.
My wife and I should have been starting a family, buying a house, settling into the routines of life together. Instead, we are here with you tonight, both completely and utterly broken.
In its judgment last week, the South Australian District Court accepted Boyle's actions were motivated by moral outrage at what he saw were the ATO's unethical practices. But the law does not acquit on the basis of good intentions.
Enabling people to make a public interest disclosure is well recognised to be in the public interest. Blowing the whistle can be a tough gig. However, the message today needs to be clear that whistleblowing is not a green light for an individual to commit crimes in the name of what they believe is for the greater good.
This central tension was explained last year by the reporter who brought Boyle's case into the light.
This is a real flaw in the law, that whistleblowers, in the act of gathering information, the law doesn't protect them.
And many think it should, including whistleblower turned MP Andrew Wilkie.
If we'd had something like a Whistleblower Protection Authority in existence when Richard Boyle was witness to misconduct initially, he would have been helped to navigate his way through this and wouldn't have got caught up in these peripheral matters for which he was ultimately charged.
Wilkie and others have struggled, however, to articulate a solution to the problem raised by the judge, that Parliament, of course, cannot write a blank cheque for the theft of confidential information. The government is, meanwhile, promising improvements to whistleblower law.
The government is committed to a second stage of reforms that will ensure the Commonwealth public sector whistleblowing framework is clear, accessible and fit for purpose.
And yet, no significant action from the government since the release of a consultation paper almost 2 years ago. And let's not forget, there are powerful interests who shudder at the thought of protecting truth-tellers like Boyle, not least our public service mandarins. In 2016, a review found the protections provided by the federal whistleblower law
appear to be undermined by a perceived lack of support for disclosures and fear of reprisal,
which the Commonwealth Ombudsman says has persisted, senior civil servants refusing to consider embarrassing whistleblower reports as opportunities for improvement. Legendary business writer for The Australian, Robert Gottliebson, who has advocated for Boyle in his regular column, warned that bureaucrats
do not want whistleblowers, and in Richard Boyle they saw the chance to tell the rest of the public service exactly that.
Listening to Boyle's speech at last year's Walkley Awards, Gottliebson was struck not by the strength of the media, but its weakness.
I felt ashamed on behalf of everybody in that room that we had not been able to stop this dreadful thing happening.
For more than a decade, the news media industry, under the standard Australia's Right to Know, repeatedly demanded of government better protection of its sources. When, in 2019, the AFP launched raids against a News Corp journalist and the ABC in the hunt for evidence against national security whistleblowers, the Right to Know coalition fired up, blacking out the front pages of newspapers across the country in an act of solidarity and protest. Since then, however, amid the pandemic and ever-shrinking balance sheets, this joint campaign has grown moribund and fallen silent. On Friday, we sought a comment about Boyle's case from senior members of the Right to Know coalition and heard back not from a united front, but a scattering of lone voices: the ABC, Nine's newspaper division and the Journalists' Union. Luke McElveen, executive editor of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, told us,
"Without urgent government intervention and legislated protection, the next Richard Boyle will rightly think twice."
There were cheers as Boyle left court last week, but since his high-profile prosecution, the real jubilation, we have no doubt, would have been expressed in whispers and winks in the corridors of power. After all, what better way to persuade those who witness corruption to stay silent? We hope Richard Boyle can walk away from this scandal proud and able to get on with his life, but hope even more keenly our elected government can find in itself the courage to stare down the bureaucracy and force change. And now to a tragedy which unfolded at a Queensland school 6 weeks ago.
An elite Brisbane private school is grappling with the loss of a student who died by suicide at the weekend. The school sent an emotional email to parents on Tuesday afternoon advising the community of the Year 9 girl's death.
An unimaginable sorrow for one family and a school community reeling at the news, with the Courier Mail reporting an email to parents from the school's principal appealing for kindness.
At this very sad and difficult time, family have requested privacy. I know that our community will respect this with the utmost sensitivity and care.
A heartfelt plea which, of course, was trampled upon by the Brisbane tabloid in a textbook example not of how best to report a youth suicide, but rather how best to compound a family's suffering. Because while we've spoken to the family, the Courier Mail never did. Instead, just 90 minutes after the principal circulated the awful news to parents and carers, the tabloid hit print with an online story which we have redacted, identifying by name not just the school and not just the student who had died, but also her sister who attends the school, as well as her mother and her father. Capping it off half an hour later by scraping from the grieving family's social media accounts photographs of the girl and her mother and publishing them too. The Courier Mail's scoop, mimicked by the Daily Mail and Sky News, both of which, it should be said, named the child but refrained from running her photograph, prompted an angry backlash from the school's parents.
I am writing to voice my utter disgust at the hideous reporting of the death by suicide of the inclusion of photographs of her and her mother was unnecessary and immoral.
The publication of this article was not only premature and invasive, but also deeply distressing to the family, the school community, and especially to children affected by this tragedy. The complete lack of empathy or care is mind-boggling.
Amidst the outcry, the Courier Mail removed the article from its website, though it appeared in print the next day, before doubling down in its next edition with this exclusive on page 1.
This has to stop. In the wake of yet another tragic teen suicide, experts have united to demand the Albanese government implement a ban on under-16s using social media by December.
And milking the girl's death in its long-running campaign against social media.
Better anti-bullying policies in schools are needed to prevent more Queensland children being lost to suicide. The issue has been thrust into the spotlight after the death of student.
then invoking her passing again in an editorial which sought to issue orders to the federal government.
The Federal Communications Minister, Annika Wells, has to respond to this week's tragedy, to stare down the threats being made by the biggest companies the world has ever known and do what is right for our children.
The girl's name also being added to this tally drawn up by the paper online. But if bullying via social media was the cause of this student's suicide, it was news to her family.
As far as we were aware, she wasn't being bullied or targeted on social media.
Salt in the wound for a woman suffering an unfathomable loss.
To see my child's death become news that was published without consent from the family, revealing names of individuals, the school, and using unauthorised photos is upsetting. It shows a total lack of respect for the privacy and the grief of the individuals involved. It also makes us feel her death was seen as another opportunity to sell.
The school too was aghast at its treatment by the paper. The principal told us,
schools need to be able to communicate with their communities personally and privately without having our grief used gratuitously as clickbait. The death of a student has widespread traumatic impacts.
So what does the newspaper industry's code of conduct say about identifying those who have died by suicide? The Australian Press Council guidelines ask that
at least one of the following criteria is satisfied. A. Clear and informed consent has been provided by appropriate relatives or close friends. Or B. Identification is clearly in the public interest.
And we fail to see how the Courier Mail's decision to identify the child and her family and to co-opt them into its own branded campaign without any consent ticks either of those boxes, which might be why the Courier Mail declined our invitation to defend what was plainly indefensible. Youth suicide is, of course, an important and valid topic for journalists and publishers, but isn't it obvious that it demands just a little thoughtfulness? In addition to marrying neatly with its wider commercial interests, there may indeed be merit in News Corporation's crusade against social media. I'd suggest, however, that when enlisting grieving families in that campaign, the publisher might want to check with them first. Now, a real treat for all of us planning our golden years, and we suspect there might be a few among us, those already enjoying them.
A $23 million luxurious new country club has opened in the heart of Pimpama as part of the new GemLife community.
Channel 9 supping from the all-you-can-eat good news buffet that is property development on the Gold Coast, bringing its more mature viewers a slice of paradise just up the road from Dreamworld.
Well, this new country club here at a luxury over-50s community has every facility you'd ever want.
And behind the doors of this new country club, a Babylon of earthly delights, which Nine's Patrina Zaffa unveiled one by one, from the infinity pool and the weight room to the private cinema and, wait for it, the golf simulator.
I may be here a while, perfecting my golf swing.
Meanwhile, a very important company executive made himself available to weather Patrina's cross-examination.
Tell us about this amazing country club.
Yeah, thanks, Patrina. This tri-level country club has everything for our residents from, living healthy and wealthy lives. So it's a fantastic development.
And as you'd expect, GemLife was deeply unhappy with Nine's forensic reporting.
A big thank you to Patrina Zaffa OAM and 9 News Gold Coast.
We're sure there may be an invitation for Patrina to return in the future to perfect her golf swing.
Oh, we're pretty sure too. And for those cynics out there who say this was a blatant ad, I say shame on you, because a spokesperson for Nine told us
this was not part of any sales deal and there was no commercial influence.
That's right, it was merely a stroke of misfortune that Patrina's exposé of GemLife's cornucopia of comforts happened to coincide the very same night with this little clearing of the throat.
9 Gold Coast News, brought to you by GemLife Gold Coast, resort-style living for the over-50s.
Sheer kismet too that 3 days later, Nine's The Sydney Morning Herald, in waxing lyrical about the same resort's wine lounge, lap pool and beauty salon, published this wee rider.
Advertorial for GemLife.
None of which, GemLife tells us, had a bit to do with Nine Gold Coast's sharp editorial choices.
The coverage arose from genuine editorial interest in a project of local and state significance.
And there were other reasons too for cartwheels in the boardroom, because this rather convenient wave of publicity coincided with a jump in earnings and a nice bounce in the company's share price. Huzzah! Everyone eats. Oh, except maybe those punters at home who had rather naively perhaps hoped to tune in for some real news rather than a soft soap job for so generous an advertiser. And that's all from us tonight. Be sure to check us out on ABC iView, as well as YouTube, Facebook and X. You can find full statements on our website, and don't forget to send us your tips. See you next week.